Vivimos en una época de profundos cambios, donde quedarnos parados no es una opción.
Tenemos que dar el primer paso, empujar hacia adelante, avanzar, hacer que las cosas sucedan.
No importa cuántos años tengas ni de dónde vengas.
Lo importante es lo que tengas que decir, lo que puedas aportar y contribuir.
Dejar lo superficial atrás y concentrarnos en lo que realmente importa.
Vivimos en un mundo interconectado, en el cual no podemos pensar y actuar de manera aislada.
Este mundo necesita de más jóvenes como tú, que asuman y ejerzan un liderazgo, con una visión global, que sean creativos e innovadores, pero sobre todo con un gran sentido humano.
Hagamos pequeños cambios y mucho ruido, porque eso es lo que hará que más jóvenes se unan y cambien conciencias para crear un gran cambio colectivo.
Cambios que, por insignificantes que parezcan, sembraron una semilla, una ilusión de cambio que algún día germinará e impactará en la vida de miles de personas.
Caminemos de proyecto en proyecto, de esfuerzo en esfuerzo y de éxito en éxito.
Cada quien aportando en su área de expertise y conocimiento.
Con un esfuerzo interdisciplinario entre todos los sectores de la población.
Hagamos sinergia entre gobierno, empresas y sociedad civil, al igual que con otras organizaciones.
Extendiendo la mano a todos aquellos que quieran y puedan ayudar.
Bajo una misma meta y un sueño en común en el que podamos ayudar a la sociedad veracruzana, escuchando y apoyando a todas las generaciones, porque este esfuerzo debe de ser intergeneracional.
Solo así podremos hacer frente al gran reto que se nos presenta como humanidad, anteponiendo el bien común al bien personal.
Pero para todo esto, debemos de caminar juntos, en una misma dirección, sin dejar a nadie atrás.
Veracruz y México te necesitan más que nunca. CANAJOPMX, por el honor de servir a México.
Hola a todos, gracias por acompañarnos. To all the international community, thank you so much for joining us today. We will have a great conference with a great young women. Here is Nafesha Richardson. Nafesha, how are you?
Thank you. I'm fine. I love the intro music. I was here, dancing. I'm doing.
Yeah, I know. It's cool.
It's very good, and I'm really happy.
It's part of this event.
Love the music.
That's right. Nafesha, thank you so much for being here. Okay, I'm explain first to all the Mexican people because obviously all the people don't speak Spanish or speak English, right? Okay, queridos amigos, esta es una conferencia en inglés, por lo que los invitamos a activar sus subtítulos en español o en inglés, dependiendo su idioma. All right, Nafesha, thank you so much for being here. Explain to all the people that then understand this conference, active the subtitles in YouTube or Facebook. So I think the woman who made this interview, I don't make this interview, but Alexa, it's been here in some little minutes. To first, Nafesha, please share us a little about your history, your passion, because I know that you have a great youth organization, that is Spark SBG. That's right, Spark SBG, or?
Yes, that's correct, Spark SBG.
Okay. First of all, explain about this interesting organization, please.
Sure. So, like many of you, I'm very passionate about young people in my country. And I noticed that in our local arena, There weren't a lot of opportunities for young people to meet in a safe space to have discussions or to talk about important matters, whether it be climate change, education, or anything that flows under the Sustainable Development Goals. There was no space dedicated to young people to have these discussions. I mean, we don't have, unfortunately, an active National Youth Council or a youth parliament. So if you are a youth that is passionate and you either want to be an activist or an advocate, or you just feel as though you want to have someone to discuss your ideas with, there was no space for you to do that. So with me noticing this gap, I shared the idea with my friends, and I basically formed Spark SVG. And we host an annual youth summit where we bring together speakers and panels. And we have an annual youth summit, sort of like what you're doing. And we also establish a youth network so that even after the summit, you can dialogue about issues and collaborate on projects with other youth activists.
That's so interesting, and I love this part to help young people, to help. I know the politics is so boring sometimes, or in the most part, but if we make with this passion of the youth, of the new generation of young people, I think it's better. I think it's more, I don't know, in Mexico said, tiene más sabor. That's right, and is more interesting, more I don't know, más liberty in English, right?
I think young people, we just do things better. We can do things faster. We think of the most creative, innovative ways. That's right. If you think about technology and the things that we can do with TikTok, Instagram, Facebook in a matter of seconds.
Yeah, I know.
Exactly. So we can really leverage our creativity to achieve things that may have otherwise taken months or years due to whatever bureaucracy that there is.
Yeah, that's right. For example, I participate in the COP. I know you participate in the pre-COP, that's right, or something like that. What do you think about the summit, this conference of climate change? Because I listened that all like Greta Thunberg and another young leaders don't be right and don't be share the ideas of the most important leaders, that Joe Biden, Justin Trudeau, and Angela Merkel, and a lot of things, and a lot of person to do. What do you think? That's right. The COP is a necessary part of this, or what do you think about it?
I feel two ways about it. Definitely, young people, we need a seat at the table. We need to be heard. I think sometimes our messaging can get a bit flustered, and then our policymakers, leaders, they're hearing us, but to them it's a bunch of noise, and then it can be very frustrating for young people who may not go through the traditional channels or even have access to those channels to be able to share their ideas and their voices on laws and policies that directly affect them. I followed, and I have been following COP26 particularly, and even speaking to some people who were actually at the event, young people especially, and those who would have attended the pre-COP, they mentioned how even though they were there, they still didn't feel very, included. There were discussions where you would have thought that they would have had an interest, but youth were told, oh, you cannot enter. I know some people even found the manifesto that we recreated in the garbage. So there were a lot of, despite what we've been hearing and the efforts to have youth included at all levels, it's when you look at an event like COP that you really see, whether the work that youth advocates like you and myself have been doing, whether it's actually worth it, because at that stage when the decisions are being made, how effective or how much is the youth voice actually included, apart from a message saying, oh yes, we recognize the work that young people are doing, what's actually being done to implement the ideas and the thoughts of young people. I think that gap is missing, and it's not, even if it's happening, it's not very clear for young people to say, okay, I put in this work and this is the direct result of it.
Yeah, I know. And well, this part of the discussion, the make this interview of ideas with the leaders and the young people is the best part, I think, of this United Climate Change Conference. But today we will have an interview with Alexa and Nafesha. And in Mexico said, yo soy un chismoso que viene aquí a hacer su relajo. Okay, Nafesha, give me a minute to explain to all the audience in Spanish, and Latin America audience. Ok, esta conversación la va a hacer Alexa Cervantes, así que yo dejo con Nafesha a Alexa. Alexa, bienvenida, gracias por acompañarnos.
Muchas gracias, es un gusto poder estar en este foro. Yo soy Alexa Cervantes y soy la presidenta nacional de la Comisión de Medio Ambiente para CANAJOPMX, y pues es para mí un honor realmente estar con Nafesha Richardson. It's really such an honor to be speaking with you today. It is great, especially talking to a woman that has taken action in terms of, well, environmental issues as well as gender equality, which I think is really important in our today's society, especially when we're dealing with such great inequalities in society. Well, in this case, it's big countries or more developed countries with other which are less favored by many things in all of these issues. So I would like to ask, what is your perspective there is like this new boom of ecofeminism about the women role in environmentalism or in this climate action, especially it's taking into account your participation in COP26?
I'm definitely here for the ecofeminism. I wish we could have more of it. I think sometimes when we look at the highest level of leadership, whether at COP or even in our countries, we don't see women represented equally. And even if sometimes they're there, it's sort of optimistic to say, oh yes, we have 3 women to make up the numbers, but then how actively are the inputs of these women being taken into consideration? So I am truly, an advocate. Like you said, I do work on climate change, but I'm also a gender advocate. I am the coordinator of the Commonwealth Youth Gender and Equality Network, where we focus on gender and governance, on youth transition. So looking at when you move from education to entrepreneurship or employment, what difficulties you may face, looking at CEFM, which may not be as prevalent in Latin America, but definitely in the Caribbean and in lots of African countries. We see issues of child and forced marriages, and all of these intricacies, they sort of affect whether or not a woman can then go forward and say, I want to put myself up for politics, or I would like to run maybe at a local level. So I think it's really important that we focus on women and the unique needs of women, because sometimes we forget that, when you think about things like intersectionality, you have to look at the issues that, for instance, a young Black woman who is disabled may face compared to, someone who does not have those levels and those layers of issues. So the ecofeminism movement is definitely one that I am in favor of, and I encourage all of the young women listening and those of you out there to, take ownership. Even though you're young, you're a woman, you're a man, you have the right to speak up and to give your input on these issues that are affecting you. So don't be afraid to use your voice wherever you can, whether it's on social media or in a more standard or political sense.
Excellent, I totally agree. And well, in the terms also of gender equality, do you think that we are moving into more progress regarding that topic, or it is merging into most imperceptible microaggressions towards women regarding empowerment as well as women participation in environmental activism?
I definitely think that there's a bit of both. I can definitely see the progression in terms of, even just having women out there being representatives. firstly, it's inspiring for young women like you and myself to be able to say, okay, I can see a woman out there and she's doing this, and I can do it too. And even in that sense, women are then able to speak to the issues that directly affect women. So when you have more women in parliament, for instance, the issues and the needs of women are better catered for, rather than, for instance, an all-male parliament. But then I also see the flip side of women who are in politics being seen as like tyrannical and, just very, there's a negative connotation, it seems, to a woman who wants to put herself out there to be that sort of a public figure. So it's definitely a double-edged sword. I wouldn't say that there's a clear-cut answer, but I mean, I would still encourage a young woman who is interested in taking that step to understand, what you're going up against, and to where you can change the narrative. And even if you're not that woman, for men and women who may not be in politics, to change the narrative and to ensure that when we see a woman who puts herself out there to be a politician or to serve in some high level of ministry, that we ensure that, there's a safe, not a safe space, I guess, and a enabling environment for that woman to thrive. Because without that, then she would fail. It's impossible for her to actually achieve what she wants to or what she endeavors to, when the environment around her is, big on critiquing and focusing on what she wears or how she carries herself, rather than what she actually brings to the table.
Of course. And regarding that topic, what would be your advice to have more representation? Well, in case of women representation, focus on these actions to make our planet a better place, rather if it's in the gender equality topic or in the environmental area topic. How can young people start to be more noticed by governments, regardless of their field of study?
I think definitely like what we were alluding to in the beginning, use what you have. We all have our phones. Your phone it's a very, mighty and strong device. And through it, you're able to sometimes communicate to hundreds, thousands, or if you're lucky, millions. So I would definitely advise that you firstly start where you can and start small. So if it's with an advocacy campaign that you want to lead, and you want to just create a social media page where you post about, say, environmental issues, and you start a community and you gain, attraction and followers, then you're able to influence that group of people. And I think, once you're recognized as being a strong voice in that community, then it's easier for you to speak to NGOs, to CSOs, and to even government leaders to say, I have this following, I have 3,000 young people who are in favor of what I'm saying, and I think that you need to listen to us, and you're able to share their stories and their experiences. So I'm always an advocate for starting small, start with your friends, start with your immediate community. And once you have that backing, it's easier to go to them and say, hey, do not ignore us. It's not just me speaking to you. It's me representing hundreds, thousands, or even if it's just 10 people who are passionate about the issue, then it's, having that grassroots beginning, you connect with these people more, then they would, of course, back what you're doing and support you when you're going up to, let's say, a higher, more political level.
Definitely. Also, well, I think it's really important to take part at your communities, because sometimes we look to the government and think that it is such a huge cause and that we can't do anything. But, well, the biggest causes start at home, at your more local interactions with people, and starting to, develop all these sorts of solutions. So how do you think that we can progress or develop more to reduce this inequality gap in both topics overall? That I was recently reading some news about how the 10% richer countries and richer people produce like the majority of the carbon dioxide or greenhouse effect gases, when, well, there's like a lot of countries and people who are in need and who are being most affected by these emissions of people that don't have necessarily the same living conditions and quality of life.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, that how is, well, your perception of how can we, well, progress more regarding this gap between more richer countries and that produce more of the contaminant emission gases to the atmosphere, and how can we act, for example, in Mexico or in other smaller countries when we are clearly affected by climate change, and sometimes, well, we aren't as responsible as some other, but we still want to take part in it and to acknowledge and make other people to take action.
Okay, definitely. I think firstly, when you see a situation where a country is, facing, for instance, in the Caribbean, we have these disastrous hurricanes and storms every year as a result of climate change. But we produce probably this much that would actually contribute to that happening. And where we have found strength is in working in numbers. So even though I'm from a country of like 100,000 people, we are a drop in the bucket in the global sphere. So I think an approach that our governments take in the Caribbean and across other small island developing states is to work in numbers. So we have regional groups like CARICOM or the OECS, and we're now fostering, but I think that we're now seeing an upward development towards relations between the Caribbean and Africa. So that's when, for instance, my prime minister speaks or prime minister from Barbados speaks. They're not speaking just for their country, but they're speaking about the region, and they're looking at, what's happening in Antigua, what's happening in Dominica, what's happening in St. Lucia, so that even though, your issue is represented, you realize that a lot of the times we're all facing the same problems, but maybe just at different levels. So I think that's something that definitely, it's a good strategy to, work in numbers and collaborate. When we went to the pre-COP, we had that experience where, we're from the Caribbean and we had these very specific needs in these issues. And there were a lot of calls for loss and damage. But then when you're speaking to youth, you'll be surprised, you're speaking to youth from more developed countries, even they were pushing back. And we were like, okay, this is strange, because you would expect, at least for young people, you would understand, rather than, when you speak to like leaders or what's not. Even they were pushing back on representing the needs of young people from the Caribbean. So what we did is that we realized that, okay, we are not just from the Caribbean, but we also make up a group of the small island developing states and least developed countries. So then we decided, okay, let's team up with young people from the Pacific, so that when we spoke, it wasn't just one or two of us, it was about 10, 15 of us, and we had a stronger voice and a stronger impact. And this actually led to, at the end of one of our pre-COP meetings, we all stood up and we made a statement, and it was very profound, because it wasn't just one person. About 15 to 20 of us stood up in the room and we said, our voices aren't being heard. We're all, splintered around these different groups. But when you look at us as a collective, then they kind of were like, okay, these Caribbean people are serious. We've been hearing them, they've been hearing whispers, but when we stood together and we made that bold claim, then afterwards we were seeing them approaching us to say, okay, how can we ensure that your messaging is included in the manifesto? So I think that was a good example of how sometimes you work so hard alone and you're trying to dig this hole by yourself. But if you collaborate and you work with others, then it's a better way to get your message out there and to show that it's not just you facing this issue, but it's, millions of other people.
Perfect. And also, well, I think it's really related to how to get to encourage older, younger people, and also into multidisciplinary areas, because many times people tend to think that climate action or gender equality action is just to the people which are more affected in it, or just to environmentalists when it is something that really affects all. So what is your message or your opinion about how to incorporate this multidisciplinary and to engage more people to take action, even if they think that they have not related fields of study, when, well, clearly all we live in this environment and in this world, and we need to preserve our planet because there isn't much time left?
I think the way that I've gotten the most response, or the, looking at, just to rephrase the issue as well, people look at environmental issues and they think green and they think recycling, and that's it. It's just environmental and just about trees in the ocean. And they think about gender issues and they think, okay, women, and that's the only box that they think about when they think about gender. So to sort of break that up, where I've had the most progress is to look at the things that people actually care about. They may not care about the environment, unfortunately, but you know what they care about? Their money. So when you show people that environmental degradation can affect a country's GDP, because, for instance, you may have rainfall and hurricanes that destroy fields and farmers are no longer able to plant and reap as they could, then you have issues of people not earning as they should have. You think about, okay, it's affecting my money. That could be a problem. What else can it affect? My food. Those same farmers who aren't making money, they're also not able to produce. For instance, when in St. Vincent, in April of this year, we had a volcanic eruption. And even though, this was an environmental issue, a natural disaster, we saw that the volcano affected our farmlands, and all of our farmers from the northern part of the country, which makes up most of our farmlands, they lost their crops, they lost their wildlife that they would sell for like meat. So then there was the issue of food security directly affecting us, and they were like, people didn't connect that, even though this was an environmental issue, it affected our food. And then we had to depend on international aid to have food, and water. Water was another major issue that we faced. So I think that looking not directly at the forefront, but showing, the multidisciplinary aspects of the issue. If we think about gender and women, when women are affected, in a lot of countries, women make up the majority. So when a woman does not have equal rights or equal opportunity, she's then not able to care for her children, who, think about it or not, may include boys and girls. So, I think it's just trying to show even though, it's environmental issues, it affects things that would directly affect you. It may affect the money that you earn. It may affect the food that you eat, the water that you drink. Thinking back again to the volcano, we had issues of technology where we didn't have access to internet for, how many days. And for me as a young person, I felt as though I would rather go without water than go without internet, because it's something that we depend on so much. So just showing what losing this thing can affect all the different aspects and the different sectors that will be affected. I think that's a great way of getting the message across.
Of course, and it's something that we can really relate about the first 3 SDGs, about how if we do not have good health, if we do not have food or water, we cannot function properly, neither at a physical level nor at the mental level, even in our emotions. So that's why many people think that, well, it's just this part of green ecological products, when, as you mentioned, it is a whole from economy, politics, science, technology, social, and humanities, which really needs to be tackled. And related to that, how do you think that circular economy would help? And if you think that, well, in this case, all this concept about reducing as much waste as possible at an industrial and at a local level would help? And if you think that, well, more countries will adopt these methods of reutilizing and not just recycling?
Definitely, it's something that I wish my own country would adopt. Sorry, when you have your trash, it's basically everything goes in one container, and you carry it to your sewage waste management or whatnot. Whereas, like when you go to the States or the US, I was exposed to people having 3 different compartments for the garbage, and that was like a couple of years ago for me. And even then, it was like, okay, that's it was a shock. It really teaches you about the importance of sustainable living. So I think like you asked in that question, at the local level, it will definitely be beneficial because in small communities, when you have that sort of change happening, and like you said, more than just recycling, but getting rid of, for instance, in Vincent, we banned plastics, which was great, yes, but then we're just seeing things being replaced. So we're seeing a lot more just a lot of trash that's not plastic, but people who are trying to use alternatives to plastic are sort of recreating the issue. So I think at the local level, it will be important to ensure that there's a societal change and that it affects people and the way they live their daily lives. And with that, you can then see it transforming to the industrial level to ensure that whenever we build and we construct, it's greener, it's safer, it's more sustainable for everyone.
Yes, definitely. And I think that was a really good point that you have mentioned regarding how people, well, sometimes plastic is banned, but then these other alternatives sometimes, which interrupts the circular economy concept, is that they are still trash. For example, well, there are some disposable cutlery that has been proven to take in as long as some of other plastic cutlery, which sells itself a circular economy when it is clearly not. So I think it's really important to really develop other kinds of alternatives which are proven to be, well, is this cycle of circular economy and not just a false idea of something that would help the environment, but it is really not helping. So, well, regarding your experience in COP26, which were most of the most regarding motivating experiences that you lived there and results that you are motivated that will be incorporated in the near future?
Well, I can say, looking on from the outside, because I didn't actually get to attend the COP, but from what I saw, I think in the Caribbean, at least, and I think for many states, we saw that there's a greater sense of, people listening, and the inclusivity. I think it is increasing, even though it's very slow. I know that there were some that were very disappointed with the outcomes of COP as well, which is understandable because it can be very frustrating when you don't see any clear mandates about an issue that you would have put forward. But I think now it's for us in our countries to go back and, implement what we can where we can. So, yeah, I'm really proud, for instance, we noticed the Prime Minister of Barbados. She had a very impactful moment at COP in her presentations and just her representation of the region. And others, I think, who may have felt unrepresented before had that level of representation at COP. So it's just now for us to look away from the big promises and the big speeches and the lectures that some would have given, and to look at the nitty-gritty details of what came out of it to then implement in our own countries.
Definitely, it is needed to take more action. And, well, I relate to all those COP outcomes as something that will reflect to be really positive, and others that thought that well, governments weren't doing as much as the promises that will appear to be something, but in the background is really just, well, other outcomes that wouldn't be really desirable for the planet. So, well, do you see that in the near future, or maybe even at a shorter period of time, well, youth will be more involved in these issues and will really acquire this, well, as well as representation, these new proposals to make these results happen and not just stay as promises and just like treaties between countries, and really to starting to see these changes?
Yeah, I definitely think it will happen, and I think it may even happen not with this generation, but when the current generation of young people become leaders. I hope that we remember where we started, that, you know, even though you may have had to knock on 10 million doors, that when the young people of today are leaders, and I know many are leaders already, that they will be more accommodating and inclusive of the ideas of young people. We're seeing the progression where youth are there, they're present, but it's, you know, in terms of their ideas being actually taken into account meaningfully, I think that gap is still missing. So we need to see more structured avenues for young people, whether it's having a youth advisory council to ensure that, you know, you have maybe one young person on a board with a voting power when decisions are being made. So that's a clear way of showing that you are meaningfully engaging young people. And it's not just to say, hey, look, we have a young person, you know, we're equal, we're inclusive. So giving youth that equal power, and even if, like I said, it doesn't happen with the present generation of leaders, that when we become the next leaders, when we will be, that we would look and remember, you know, I used to be advocating for this for years. So I'm going to ensure that I don't even just wait until a young person knocks on my door, that I would go out and try to reach out to young people in my communities, ensure that they don't have to reach out to me, that I'm actually taking a step to contact them and ensure that they are included at all times.
Yes, definitely. Also, Angel was, well, willing to ask, so I think that he will show up at this moment. Hi, Angel.
I'm still here because I think you need help, Alexa. What happened? It in Mexico say es broma, es broma. Nafesha, I have a question that in the chat make a lot of people. How do you visual the participation of the world's youth in this moment? Because in Mexico is not. Well, it's probably you think that is a greatest participation, but it's little. Is a little participation of the young people. What do you think about? Do you think that this can help in some moments?
I do agree that it's very little, and like what I said before, when it's there, it's just like a figurehead to say, you know, we are present, but it's a hope that I have in the future. And when I visualize what that looks like, it's equal participation, so that we even sort of stray away from the heavy dependence on the term youth, and we just think about people, so that when you want to, let's say, create a policy, you're not going to say, oh, let's have the youth voice, but let's include all people of all ages at all levels. I think that's the ideal future that I envision, to where, you know, it's not just a label to say, yes, this is a youth and we have youth present, but that it gets to the stage where being a young person isn't just a hat that we wear. It's a part of our identity, yes, but it's not a situation where, you know, we are only seen as a young person. We should be seen as, you know, for our strengths, our creativity, whatever our field is, what we've studied and what we can bring to the table, apart from just being a young person, but the intrinsic values and the intrinsic skills that we have as young people, that they are recognized, realized, and appreciated at all levels.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I make a last question, Alexa. Don't worry. But we know the politics is a culture, is a life, is passion, is a lot of things. The politics. But how much openness do you have in your country, with your government, with your Senate, with your, well, in Mexico said, senador and diputados, that is a Senate and represent in the Camera. What do you think about it? You have this opportunity to open, to talk, to discuss, to share ideas, or not really?
Like I said, we don't have a national youth council or a national youth parliament. So to me, it's the openness is zero. There's no direct avenue unless you take it upon yourself to say, I'm going to go to a meeting of parliament, or I want to speak to a minister. There's no, you don't have, unless you take it upon yourself to go to them, they don't have those doors open to say, we're making XYZ provisions for youth and you should be included in ABC ways. It's literally, if you as a young person have a passion about a particular issue, then you have to say, knock on the door, listen to me, I have something that I want to say. But in terms of, there being an open environment for young people to collaborate and to speak, it doesn't exist, unfortunately. And it's something that we're trying to work on. I know that people are trying to reignite that sort of interaction, because I know that we had a very active youth movement that, would have spoken with politicians, particularly with the National Youth Council before, but currently that environment isn't there.
Well, also regarding the question that Angel made, I would also like to comment on your opinion about how can we make more opportunities for young people, because I think that also in Mexico, one of the problems, because people, some don't want to participate, others find it difficult to find opportunities, and the few opportunities to be a change maker are limited to very few other young people, and there isn't enough representation. So, some people said, we made our opportunity for other young people. So how can we, rather of making projects or other action, how can we start to involve more people and make them involved and engaged in these socially active causes?
Sure. I think it's unfortunate that we have to do so much of this ground and grunt work to get the inclusion. But I think that leaders also have to, one, create more spaces for intergenerational dialogues so that young people and leaders can, share ideas in a shared space. I think that there needs to be more funding for youth-led initiatives. As I know, and I'm sure many of your listeners know as well, we often work in volunteer roles and there's no compensation for the work that we're doing. So even though you may have a particular issue that you want to tackle, if you're not able to be financed or you're not compensated for your time, then you may have to focus strictly on your 8 to 4 job. So I think that there needs to be more funding for activities and initiatives that are led by young people to encourage young people to, have their voices heard. I think as well that, like I mentioned before, we need to have more spaces, whether it be on boards or on structured governmental groups, to ensure that young people are, we're included, yes, but look, we have a voting power. It can also be things like a youth advisory council that you have to listen to, that, when the advisory council gives you ideas or proposals, that then they are taken on board by the leaders to ensure that, the voice and the input of youth are being taken on board seriously. So I think that, by having these structured groups, by providing more funding for youth, I think those are great ways to ensure that youth are represented. And on the flip side, as young people, how do you get your voice out there? It's try again, reach out to who you can, where you can. So if you know an influential person in your community who can back the cause that you're pushing, then of course reach out to them, share your ideas, and share it with your friends, your immediate grassroots community. And it's only from there, and with of course persistence and consistency, that you would be able to achieve your end goal.
Completely agree. And finally, what would be an empowering message or a message for empowerment to these young generations and new generations that are here to come?
A message of empowerment. I hope I have said this already, but I mean, as simple as I can put it, I would say to just keep trying. Sometimes it can feel as though you are fighting an uphill battle, or you're talking into a dark hole and nobody's listening to you. And this work, as I have experienced and many have experienced, it can be very daunting and very lonely, and it can affect your mental health and your happiness, and you may even feel depressed because you say, okay, I'm here, I'm talking, I'm doing all of this work, but it feels as though no one is listening to me. So I would say, first of all, be consistent, to keep on trying and get creative in the ways that you want to achieve the work that you're doing. But apart from that, take care of yourself, ensure that you as a person, that your needs are being met, and it's only then that you can go out there and say, I want to help someone else. So just, like they say, just keep swimming, just keep trying, and ensure that your personal health and well-being is always taken care of, because it's so important. You can't be out there advocating for the world and then internally you're fighting your own battles.
Definitely. So, well, I think this conversation was really inspiring. I think to all the people here in our audience, as well as to me, it's really empowering to see representation and someone who has taken action and, well, get really extraordinary results from, well, St. Vincent and Grenadines. And it is such an honor, as I mentioned at the beginning, and it was awesome to have this conversation with you. I left to Angel to say some few extra words, but I was really honored to have this conversation. Thank you very much, Nafesha. It is awesome.
Thank you. And thank you, Alexa. You did a great job. It was great talking to you.
That is a pleasure for us, Nafesha. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are excited in the moment that contact you, and we can, things. I think we have a great problem in our countries, in Mexico, in San Vincent and the Grenadines. That's right? That is the name?
Yes, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, yes.
Oh my gosh, sorry, but I never listened.
Pronounce your V's as B's, I think, so that's maybe where it is.
Okay, that's a problem for me. But thank you so much, because we know that you are greatest young women, and we appreciate the time to talk with us in this Canajo Veracruz Virtual Summit. And well, I think we say a lot of things that I think the people to see us, we can inspire and create new places, new prosperity, new future, new countries, new science, a lot of things to do, and we appreciate that. Thank you so much, Nafesha, for being here.
Thank you for having me. It was truly a pleasure, and I hope that I really got the message across there to the young people in Mexico who are listening, and across Latin America and the wider world. So it was really a pleasure. And, just keep pushing. You guys can do this. And you have other young people who will support you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And bueno, en español, gracias a todos por vernos, les agradecemos mucho que nos hayan acompañado en este segundo día de transmisión. Recuerden que todavía nos quedan muchos días, así que si no se han registrado, por favor regístrense y acompáñenos en los siguientes días junto con Alexa y todo el panel de moderadores, todos los panelistas y moderadores que tenemos. Alexa, te agradezco mucho. Gracias por estar aquí. Nafesha, again, thank you so much for joining us today and this beautiful, beautiful night. And all the people of the world, thank you so much for being here. Remember, register now in the website www.canajopmx.com. Ok, gracias a todos, se los agradecemos mucho. Nos vemos mañana en la próxima conferencia. Nafesha, see you. Bye bye.
See you. Thank you very much.